We've got an exciting call today, and I'm very glad that we not only have our regular participants, but we have a lot more people on the call than we usually do. And I think it's because of the important topic. We're going to spend most of the call addressing the issues around student loans and how housing counselors can more effectively address these issues. I think this will all be very helpful for all of us, but we do want to talk about a few things beforehand so that we're having a we do cover the bases, but we'll go through them more quickly than we usually do for these calls. And just as a quick alert, it's interesting to me that normally we have anywhere from 80 to 120 people on a call like this. When we have a blockbuster call, we think of like the Millennials call or Sarah Jarik, we'll get a 200, 250. So we've already had over 500 people sign up for this call specifically. And so in the back of your mind, if you can think about, are there other kinds of issues like this that we want to be working on that are vital enough to the industry that will really capture large crowds of people? We're very interested in those topics. It's been suggested that we do one on bankruptcy. I'd be interested in knowing if there's interest in that. Another one maybe on transfer of title and what happens when a spouse dies, and the problems both in delinquency and non-delinquency situations. So we're open to those kinds of things. We don't want to take place of the fine work that training organizations do, the larger networks. We're really trying to think of those small slice things that are that we can be nimble about and do quickly. We'll spend more time on those. So keep that in your mind. So here's the plan for today. We're going to do a quick update on federal funding. Thank you for all the work that people have been doing on this, and Matthew will give us the latest on that. We've mentioned the CFPB escalation line for people that are cases that are delinquency cases that are stuck in the system. We'll talk about the latest thinking on this, and then we'll dive right into the housing counseling and student loans topic. We have Natalia Abrams from Student Debt Crisis, Joshua Cohen, who's a leading lawyer on student debt. We also have Cody Hunanian, who also works with Student Debt Crisis, and that's what we'll spend most of our talk on. And then, of course, I'd like you all to think about joining NHRC. We've had a great year in terms of membership. We'd love to keep that rolling. Okay, let's move on. So, Matthew, tell us about where we're at on federal funding now.
All right, yeah, so we'll just run through this quickly. And we did mention on the last call that, so you see the numbers up there. It happened in the past that the House had passed their THUD appropriations bill that included $42 million for the NFMC program, down from $50 million for the current fiscal year. But then when the Senate acted, the Appropriations Committee, they zeroed it out. So there's obviously a huge difference there, and our goal is to get the number close to the House number, much closer to the House number. So there's kind of two possible outcomes at this point. The more likely outcome, and it's increasingly looking more and more likely, is that there'll be a continuing resolution. Actually, I was just reading an article just before we got on that Speaker Boehner had commented that he thought it was inevitable that there would be at least some continuing resolution, not necessarily for a year long, but that there's going to be so few days left in September when they come back from the August recess that he just thinks it's impossible that something's going to get done. So there'll need to be at least a temporary CR. The alternative would be, and it could be both things. It could be a 1 or 2 month CR followed by this, but the alternative would be some sort of a compromise reached between Democrats and Republicans that would lift the spending caps. As we mentioned a bunch of times, Democrats basically are unwilling to pass any budget with the current spending levels, so they just think they're inadequate. In that case, there would be a negotiation that would be between Senators Collins and Reed, who are the ranking member, and the chair of the THUD subcommittee in the Senate, and it would be Mario Diaz-Ballard and David Price on the House side. One good bit of news is that we spoke with Senator Reed's office. They wanted to be very clear that they're supportive of NFMC. They just weren't able to get it into the bill that came out of the Senate Appropriations Committee. David Price, the Democrat on the House side, has been very supportive. So the trick for us would be to win over Senator Collins, and also to make sure that the House is willing to stand by the $42 million that they passed. So again, this is down the road, but potentially, depending on what happens in terms of a CR, we would have a campaign and be reaching out to all of you, asking you to be reaching out to your representatives, especially Republicans, asking them to put pressure on the leadership in the THUD subcommittee. I'll also just mention quickly something else that's happening right now, and it's something that I haven't been tracking closely, kind of just came to my attention yesterday, but there's a highway bill that the Senate may be voting on. It may come for a vote today with some pretty bad provisions in there. It would divert some of the remaining funds from the hardest hit funds, and also some of the G fees, the guarantee fees, and put that money into funding highways. Kevin McCarthy, who's in the House leadership, has said that he doesn't think that the House is going to do anything with that. They're going on August recess after next week. So it may be another thing that just comes out of the Senate and doesn't actually become law, but it does have, I believe it has bipartisan support in the Senate. Senator Brown had a press release this morning coming out strongly against it, but I do think they have the votes to get it out of the Senate at least. So that is all I'll say for now. Bruce, if you want to add anything.
Well, just a quick shout out to Deanna Kirkpatrick at ESOP and Laura Buxbaum in Maine for really scrambling and putting together critical calls that helped make sure that Senator Reid this is Jack Reid, was supportive. Matthew got the call right afterwards saying they were hearing that they weren't supportive enough, and they wanted to make very clear that they were. So that's really effective. The other thing is South Florida. We're going to need to do something major in Diaz-Ballard's district, and so if you're in South Florida, please be in touch with Matthew about participation there. This is critical for our funding going forward. Okay, let's keep going. So, yes. Oh, yeah, it's okay. I put a slide in. I guess not. So we're on the CFPB escalation lines. Here's the situation. As we all know, the CFPB has encouraged people to use the mortgage to do complaints around consumer complaints and use their line. Unfortunately, because of the heavy volume of activity there, they are not able to follow up on individual complaints outside of doing a one-time correspondence with the, in our case, in mortgage cases, with the servicer or whatever the institution is. And because mortgage complaints are such a heavy volume in their complaint system, and because we brought this up repeatedly in meetings, CFPB has come back and said they were going to assign 2 people to be escalation contacts within CFPB for cases where that are clear violations of the CFPB rules. And the problem is that they're very worried this is going to be overwhelmed. And there's been a discussion, Ruth Susswine, Consumer Action, has kind of led these discussions. We've been deeply involved. But the discussion has been, can we set up a system where there's some screening beforehand of complaints before they actually go to the escalation, so that only exactly the right ones go in? And frankly, we all know that some of us, me included, will, when we think there's something that went wrong, even if it's not necessarily a violation, will try to advocate in every forum possible. And in this case, we just don't have the capacity to do that. So the idea would be that there would be volunteers who would act as the initial screen and figure out which ones are violations, which ones aren't, maybe help people frame the argument a little bit more crisply in the CFPB terms, and then submit those that are being done. This line is only going to be available to housing counselors and to legal services attorneys, and there's, for example, in New York, there's already work going on through Empire Justice and the Center for New York City Neighborhoods to set up a screening system like that. And the question is, can we figure out ways to do that, whether it's inside the existing networks, as an intermediary might do it for their network, or if we could do it geographically for organizations that wouldn't get that kind of coverage. And so we're interested in people who might be interested in taking on that role. We'll provide some training. The CFPB may do some training as well. So important opportunity. Please email us if you're interested, and we'll put you into the discussion topic. It's a very good group of people working on this.
I'll just mention that so far the experience has been that the volume has not been a lot, and we certainly don't anticipate that it would be, you know, anything near an overwhelming burden on folks. It would just be, you know, obviously the more volunteers we have, the lesser the volume would be, but it should not be an overwhelming thing.
Good. Well, let's get to the topic at hand. So we are really appreciative of that Natalia Abrams has sort of helped us frame this up, but this is an area that has had tremendous attention in the housing counseling world, and we are very grateful that we're doing this. So Natalia Abrams is the Executive Director of Student Debt Crisis, which is a leading advocacy group around student debt issues. Had a major role in getting the million signatures to the administration around student debt issues, and as an advocate who's regularly in the news, but also deeply knowledgeable about the work we're doing. Cody Hunanian works with her as apparently the digital director, and Josh Cohen is a well-respected lawyer who's been working in student debt and really has a very clear understanding of what the critical issues are here. We're thinking of this conversation as an introduction to counselors, and that this fall we're going to put together a series of webinars. There'll be much more in depth on these, and we can provide training for counselors that will be very, very useful for people. Hopefully this is enough to get people started today, but that the webinars that will be done in the fall will be aimed at the broader counseling community and not just in terms of managers. And the idea will be that we'll have a kind of a deeper education on these. And I think the one other quick thing I will add is that our interest here is that there's some things that counselors should be able to handle. We think there's some things that are maybe more technical and that specialists should handle, and there's some things that really only attorneys should be handling. But one of the things we'll try to do between now and the fall is to really have a set of resources to make available to counselors so they can figure out what they can do themselves, who they should be referring to if it's a specialist, and maybe try to figure out some way to figure out what the appropriate resources are among attorneys as well, to make this all work better, because we know this is a huge issue for people. So on that note, welcome Natalia, Cody, and Josh. I'd love to have you join us. We're going to switch into Natalia's computer here so she can control her slides, and we're ready to go. Welcome, all three of you.
Thank you, Matthew. I believe we have Cody and myself on right now, and Josh will be joining us shortly.
Okay, good.
So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. It seems like we have a lot of attendees, and that's fantastic, because it's really important that we are all educated on student loan debt and also the effects that student loan debt has on the housing market. And this used to be, I went back to school later in life, but myself, even when I was in my young 20s in the late 90s, we were told this was good debt to have, that this would not affect your ability to buy a house. And in some senses, that was true when when you could go to a public college for less than $5,000 a year. But even the public college I went to, UCLA, is now around $14,000 a year. So you're looking at $50,000, $60,000 just to attend a UC college. And when the rate of tuition is getting so high, that starts to really mess with your income to debt ratio. So, now we're seeing student loan debt much more affect the housing market, or your ability to get a loan, than ever before. And as you can see with our first slide, that we have the president of the New York Federal Reserve saying that this is delaying people into the housing market, first-time home buyers. We're seeing this affect household formation. Investors, that's a really big deal when we're talking about buying houses. So we can go to the next slide. Great. So I think everyone here has an idea. That this is a big issue, but just to quickly run down the numbers, we currently are at $1.3 trillion of total student loan debt in America. That's trillion with a T. There are between 42 and 43 million Americans struggling with student loan debt. The New York Times just released on Sunday the new average student loan debt, which is $35,000, $35,501. That actually has gone up $5,501 from the previous year. So this is growing out of control due to, we believe due to a lot of state disinvestment that is causing states to raise tuition. And so of these 42 million, 43 million, 11% are delinquent, meaning that they are, struggling to pay their student loan debt. We have 21%, effectively they're in default or they're struggling with their debt. So of that 42 million, nearly 2/3 are having trouble paying their student loan debt. And that's something that I believe really matters to you all, that we need to make sure that their loans are in good standing, that borrowers are paying the lowest monthly fees they can, so that they can have enough money to be able to pay for their mortgage. And so we're going to talk about ways that you can actually lower your student loan debt, your monthly output, because as we know, overall, I've learned from you all, does matter more. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to talk also about if your loan is in default, how you can get that to good standing, follow up with how this really affects the housing market, and then some resources, and then we'd love to have some questions and answer and be able to answer your questions at the end. So we can go to the next slide. All right, so something very important is that our student loan system is broken up into federal loans and private loans. For the most part, federal loans are the loans that you want your clients to have. They can be subsidized or unsubsidized. Most of your, with subsidized, your interest doesn't begin until 6 months after you graduate. Most of the deferment periods are 6 months, even for unsubsidized. It's just really about when interest is accruing. Federal loans have a lot of these programs that we are going to discuss that you can get into if you're struggling to make your monthly payments. Private loans, however, do not. The only time that we would ever recommend a private loan is to somebody that already has a fantastic credit score, some of their own personal assets, and then there are groups like SoFi, which is a private lender that you could get loans for 2 or 3% lower than the federal rate, which is about 4%. However, most people that are in need of loans to begin with, federal loans are going to be their safest bet. So private loans are something that comes out of your bank or credit union. There are no federal programs that you can enroll in. Some of these companies have trouble with default. Private loans are very difficult. And I believe it was Matthew that mentioned before, what are things that specialists should touch and what should attorneys touch. For the most part, when we get calls from student loan borrowers, if they are private loans, we always refer to an attorney. And also if students are in default, and we'll go over their kind of first chance at default. If they've already gone through that, then we also refer default cases to attorneys as well. I think the other stuff that we're about to go through, experts or your credit counselors, this is a really great place to start. So we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to pass it over to Cody, who, not only is our digital director, he's also a recent graduate, and he has had some personal experiences switching from a few of these different programs. So I think these programs are going to be one of the most beneficial things that you can know to help your client lower their student loan debt to create more income for a mortgage. So Cody.
Hello all. Just as Natalia was saying, income-driven repayment plans are going to be the #1 tool that your clients are going to reach out to get their monthly payments lowered, and that's really important to recent graduates like myself. But I'd ask that you all keep in mind as we go through these programs and consider how these programs can be used as tools to lower things like monthly output, like Natalia was discussing, and really set up first-time home buyers for easy approval. So we can move on to the next slide. Great. And just a reminder before we get through some of this, only available to federal loans. That's, again, another reason why it's so crucial that we would guide a client into an area that doesn't give them narrow options on how they can begin repayment. So I'm going to go in chronological order and how these plans have kind of been introduced to the public. The first one is income contingent repayment. This is going to be available to loans that are of older standing, not necessarily anything that's decades old, but maybe 10 to 15, 20 years old loans. So as you see, income contingent repayment is designed to lower students' monthly payments with really the ultimate goal of helping people who are going to be in careers at lower salaries. And these are often some of the most important careers in our society. Public service, so we're talking about teachers, public defenders, nurses, social workers, all different kinds of things are really important to the glue of society, but aren't necessarily paid to the level in which we appreciate their services. So the next important thing to understand when it comes to a program like this is how they're going to calculate your monthly payment. For this program specifically, they're going to use your income, your family size, and the total amount that you've borrowed. You'll see later when we move on to other programs, they'll drop things like, I'm sorry about that. They'll drop things such as total amount borrowed, other factors, and it'll get confusing, but we'll go through some of those different factors involved. As you see, the income contingent repayment is going to be adjusted annually. So I do this with my repayment program. Every year I present my last year's tax return, my annual income, and using that and the formula, they will come up with a monthly payment that is often a quarter of what the original payment would be. And that's really key, is lowering monthly output so that not only are you able to afford your monthly payments on your student loans, but have much more available for other expenses, that the largest one probably being a mortgage or so. Crucial aspect to it, and these other programs, after you've finished your repayment program, if there's any debt left available, that will be forgiven. But it is a taxable income. We like to stress that, but these forgiveness options are really key. So let's move on to the next slide.
So can I quickly ask you a question, Cody?
Yes, sir.
Cody? So, what's the
Yes,
definition of public service here?
Well, when it comes to public service, it is really uses the profitability of your employer. So as long as it's a nonprofit, or you work within a municipality, state, local, or even out to the federal government, these are all the kind of things that are included in public service. Does that help clarify?
So, so it could be that we could think about our housing counselors. So housing counselors work for 501c3 organizations by and large, and they're nonprofit. So could the housing counseling staff apply for this income contingent repayment?
Yes, and just to interject, this is an example of the type, you actually do not have to be in public service for income contingent repayment. It just tends to benefit people in public service the most. There is, which we don't really, there is an additional program. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't lower your monthly payments, called Public Service Loan Forgiveness. And that is a program that, when coupled with any of these income-driven repayment plans that we're going to show you today, you, after 10 years versus 25 years or 20 years with these other programs, your loans would be forgiven and not taxed as income. And to answer your question, yes, anyone that works in a public service field or works for a C3 can apply for this. And so in future webinars, we can go more into public service loan forgiveness. One of the reasons we didn't bring that up today is that doesn't lower your payment. But again, coupled with an income-driven repayment program for that select group of society that's working in public service or working for a C3, it cuts all these programs down to 10 years, and then the rest is forgiven. That program started in 2007. We have yet to see the first recipients, but they will be in July of 2017. That the first people will graduate, so to speak, out of the public service loan forgiveness program.
So that if somebody had a loan from 2006, they couldn't apply, but if they had a loan from 2007, they could? Is that correct?
No. So if someone, it's just the program started in 07. So as long as you have a direct federal loan or you are in a repayment program, then it just starts in 07. So if you just found out about the program today, anybody in the direct loan or in an income-driven repayment program from the federal government that is in public service or works for a C3, and it is, for lack of a better word, retroactive. If you just found out about it today,
great,
you can go backwards. And from 2007, you might be 8 years into this program and not even know you're 2 years away from having all of your debt forgiven.
Cool. Can I just mention someone?
We're happy to take more questions about public service loan. Oh, go ahead.
So I'll just quickly mention someone pointed out and maybe you could comment on that. Not with the public service loan forgiveness, but with for loans that are forgiven based on the income contingent payment, that is taxable, as that's considered taxable income. Could you comment on that?
Correct. So all of everything except for public service loan forgiveness. So everything we're showing you today on the slides, all of this is taxed as income once the loans are forgiven. And this is something really important to tell your clients, because we feel that the student loan servicers and even the Department of Ed do not make this crystal clear, that yes, you might have $30,000 forgiven, but that might put you in a different income bracket, and you will be taxed on that as if you were given $30,000 in income. So it's a very important thing to know. And I believe we can go to the next slide, and I'll hand it back over to Cody to continue talking to you about income-driven repayment programs.
Thank you, Natalia, for clarifying. So this is going to be probably the most common program that a client will come and ask about. It's the most famous currently, and it's widely used. This is income-based repayment. It's very similar, but instead of including the total amount borrowed when calculating your family size. Similarly to income contingent repayment, after you've made those minimum payments for 25 years, whatever left is going to be forgiven. And again, it's going to be a taxable income. So these programs are very similar in many ways. It's these details of what factors they calculate in capping your payments are really going to be different. If you see on point 3 on the slide, they use a sliding scale to determine how much you can afford. They base that based on what they consider the poverty level for your family size. So if you earn below 150% of the poverty level, your payment will be $0. What's great about that for first-time home buyers, someone who's building credit and needs to get approved for a loan, as long as you, even if you have, even if you had a payment at $0, as long as it appears as if you're making your monthly payments on time, you are building good credit, and your credit report will reflect that. So there's going to be clients that will be below this 150%, will be paying $0 a month on their student loans, but will be slowly building good credit and slowly, building a repertoire or building a credit report that's worthy of approval for a mortgage without ever having to pay a monthly payment. So that's another benefit that comes from some of these income-based programs.
And this is incredibly valuable for people that are in foreclosure or having serious delinquencies, and we're trying to figure out how to help them manage their payments. If we could reduce to 0, that'd be good. And what happens then to the unpaid balance?
So you will every year you'll resubmit your income, and they will adjust your payments. So long that you are at a level in which they'll lower your payments, you can pay less than what your monthly payment was going to be on the standard plan, and whatever is left over after 25 years of qualifying payments, again, will be forgiven, but included as taxable income.
So your interest keeps accruing, and this is also something to warn your clients of, that they'll get on this program, and we get calls all the time saying, I got on this program to save me money, and now my loan balance is higher. And you say, not to worry, you're going to stay on this program for 25 years, even if you're paying $0 or $50 or $100, and at the end of that 25 years, whatever is left over, as Cody mentioned, will then be taxed as income. But it will go away. So, you don't need to, if you want to pay it off sooner, this is not necessarily the right payment. The standard direct 10-year repayment program is going to be your fastest way to get out of it. But if you're looking to buy a home while you're dealing with your $80,000 federal student loan debt, this program is really great, as Cody mentioned, to free up those dollars to be able to pay your mortgage.
And if I can just put it in perspective for you, I currently have $30,000 in student loans myself. My standard repayment amount per month would be just under $400 a month. When I enrolled in the income-based repayment program, that lowered my monthly payment to around $110. So it's almost 25% of what I was going to pay originally. So I'm sure you can all understand how much freeing up that extra $300 can mean for a future loan or other housing expenses. So it really can be a powerful way to free space on a house, on a mortgage. But yeah. So we can go to the next slide.
It's in Italian, Cody. You're breaking up a little bit, so I don't know if that has to do with a wireless hookup or anything like that.
Is this better as I talk directly into the mic?
That's good.
Okay.
That's perfect.
So we can go to the next slide. And then Cody's going to continue talking because he went from income-based repayment to Pay As You Earn, which is a newer program that President Obama initiated. And so
Great.
Go ahead.
So this is the newest program, Pay As You Earn, or PAYE. This is something that still isn't widely known about, and that's part of our mission, is to spread awareness of this program, because it is very similar to income-based repayment, the one I just spoke about. However, the current benefits for a borrower are enormous. So If you see on the second point, it says caps monthly federal student loan payment at 10% of discretionary income. Why this is good is because under the income-based repayment program, the cap is 15%. So you're getting a 5% decrease on your monthly payments. So it already benefits borrowers today by that much. So it's a huge jump. Also, if you look further, it says that pay-as-you-earn is 2/3 of what it would be under IVR. So even though many people have heard of income-based repayment, it's going to be the #1 thing clients will ask of you. We always steer people to pay-as-you-earn because it has this enormous benefit. Additionally, instead of making qualifying payments for 25 years, this program shortened it to 20 years. So after your 20 years of qualifying payments, that's when you will receive your forgiven amount. So, I mean, it's pretty apparent. You can see that lowering the discretionary income to 10% and lowering the repayment to 20 years as opposed to 15% and 25 years is a huge benefit. And for those who are counseling, there will be people who are in income-based repayment, as I was, and don't know that they can switch to pay-as-you-earn and benefit today. So understanding the differences between these programs is very key. Also, this is where things do get complicated amongst the programs. There's time frames for when you can enroll in these programs. The time frame that's very key for pay-as-you-earn is you have to be a new borrower after September 30th of 2011. So you'd have to have at least one loan since then. So you can see that kind of excludes a large amount of older clients, but for young people or non-traditional students, it's who have very current, recent loans, this is a huge, huge program that will benefit them.
And to add on a policy front, this is President Obama last year signed an executive order to expand pay to more borrowers. The Department of Education has been conducting many hearings, and we just recently last week got some suggestions for what they're calling repay, but the actual expansion hasn't taken effect yet. So right now we're giving you current information. And so IVR is going to be applicable to most of your borrowers, but if, as Cody mentioned, if you have new loans, at least one loan has been since 2011, they might be eligible for pay. And as we continue on, we'll show you that the Department of Education has a fantastic calculator. They have a way to, through your Social Security, to pull up your clients' loans directly so they can see what program they can apply for and what will be the best program for them. I believe we can go to the next slide. Okay, so now we get in, those three were the crux of income-driven repayment programs. Now we're going to touch a little bit on default. As I mentioned before, default's a very tricky thing. For the most part, we do refer all default cases to attorneys. However, if you have someone that has fallen into federal loan default for the very first time, and now default is 9 months of roughly 9 months of missed payments. They've not communicated with their lender. They have not put them on forbearance or default. Something happened in their life, and now it's 9 months later, and they want to get this under control. And in order to get, you know, a mortgage, they're going to have to take care of their student loan debt. So if it's a first-time offender for federal loans, there's something called default rehab. And this is an agreement that you make with the Department of Education to rehabilitate your loan. They use a similar calculation that income-based repayment is. The payments can be as low as $5 a month. You will pay that for 9 months. Is that correct? Yeah, for 9 months. Keep in mind, once you're in default, collection costs can be added. Your loan is going to grow larger than it was before, but default rehab is key. You need to complete this after 9 months, then your loan will be back in good standing. Now this is key, and Joshua Cohen has taught me this. You need to make sure that client also, once their loan is into good standing, enrolls in an income-driven repayment program. Because if they don't, they're going to have $1,200 monthly payments and more than likely fall into the same problem they fell into before. If you fall into default for a second time, which means another 9 months of failure to pay, your entire loan balance becomes due. The most that the department or your collection agency will negotiate with you is about 10% of the entire amount. So this is why we stress so much that default is horrible. And also keep in mind there is no bankruptcy, or excuse me, Joshua corrects me, there's no, it's very, very difficult to get bankruptcy for student loan debt, for student loan borrowers. So, you know, default is definitely this place that your clients do not want to be. If it's their first time, there's some hope to get them out of it. If it's their second time, that again, that whole loan balance becomes due. You have to negotiate with the creditor, and if you don't pay, they will garnish your Social Security. They will garnish your tax refunds. They will garnish your disability checks. They will garnish your paychecks. They will get their money. So it's important that your clients are aware of all of these programs. And if they get into default, they get out of it and they immediately get on an income-driven repayment program so they can make sure that they have lower monthly payments and don't have this problem happen again. And keep in mind, again, like with income-based repayment, if you're making zero, you pay zero, but yet you stay in good standing. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is to go over what we talked about and who is eligible for these programs. You can find all of this information at the Department of Education's website, which is ed.gov. You can find this at a resource site that Student Debt Crisis has built with the AFL-CIO called theborrowers.org. But we have this for you just to take a look at, you know, who applies for ICR, income contingent repayment, who can apply for IBR, income-based repayment, and who is eligible for pay as you earn. And something that we didn't mention was Parent Plus loans. So these are the loans given to parents to help their children go to school. These loans are at a considerably higher interest rate, an average of about 7% for parents. Again, this is that weird space that sometimes, depending on the current assets and current credit worthiness, so to speak, of the parent, sometimes a private loan at a smaller rate will be better, but there won't be any programs. Most of these programs that we're mentioning do not really apply to Parent Plus loans. And so these are loans that are applying directly to the borrower that's taken it out, not their family. So we can go to the next page. Okay, just things to keep in mind. Income contingent and income-based repayment are both 25 years. The new IBR, income-based, is 20 years and pay is 20 years. IBR is at 15% and pay is at 10%. Yep. And so that's, you know, when pay as you earn came along, you know, to the fact that it was 10% and 20 years, that's really what, I mean, as advocates, we want this to be even lower, but we like that it's getting better. We like that these programs are here to help people to avoid default. That's one of the biggest things we do at Student Debt Crisis is counsel borrowers and keep them at bay from falling into default. We can go on to the next slide. Okay, just another overview because we just want to stress this to you so much. IBR 15, new IBR, which is very similar to pay and turned into pay, and then ICR. And we can go to the next slide. So here we wanted to just give you an example, as Cody was talking about, of what this looks like. And as I mentioned before, the Department of Education has a repayment estimator. One of the quickest ways to find it is just to Google it, and we can also send resources later, I'm assuming, through Bruce and Matthew. But the income-based repayment calculator, the repayment estimator, is a great way for you and your clients to see just how much they'll save. So, for example, we have a single person that has $30,000, a family size of 1. This is an individual. Their student debt is $35,000. Their interest rate is the current interest rate at 4.29%. They're able to save almost $200 per month on their student loan debt, money that can, as stated, can be used to pay a mortgage. And you can only see how you save more kind of the larger loan balance you have and the less you make. So just, again, can't stress how important income-based repayment and income-driven repayment programs are, especially when you're trying to counsel people into getting a mortgage. I believe we can go to the next slide. Just wanted to stress that, it's not just us talking about this. The National Association of Realtors, I believe this was a few years ago, people are getting afraid of the effects, especially on millennials that are not getting married, they're not buying homes, they're not buying cars, they're not contributing to the economy due to really high student loan debt payments. We hear people, an average payment of $300 to $500, but people pay upwards of $1,600 a month on their student loan debt. And you can think of all the things they're not able to purchase when they're doing that. I have plenty of colleagues that are making well over $100,000, perfect candidates to be home buyers, but they're stuck in basement apartments because of their super high student loan debt. Next slide, please. So a recap. Why are we talking to you? What does this have to do with the real estate market? Just some facts to kind of reinstate what we've been saying, that we are not seeing as many first-time home buyers. We are seeing existing home buyers switch homes between each other, but not creating these new household formations or new home buyers. Every $250 per month in student loan debt reduces borrowers' purchasing power by $44,000. 308,000 purchases were lost due to student loan debt. We really want, I think, obviously as advocates, we want to help alleviate this crisis on a much bigger level, but we think the more people that can talk about these programs, the better off everyone will be. Currently, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau last year, Rohit Chopra stated, of only about 10% of student loan borrowers are using the available government programs. So again, one of our biggest jobs is to make sure everyone knows about the available programs, so they're paying the lowest amount they can, so they can have their money free to do what they want with it, especially buying houses and contributing to the economy. So, and the last thing, as we talked about, debt to income ratio matters. You all know that, we know that, but so does monthly output. So the important thing is that we want to get that down as low as possible. And, for your clients that have money, right, that they're doing pretty well, I still would suggest that if their monthly payment is not too high, then I do suggest staying on that standard 10-year payment. So I personally did not take out too much money. I only had $15,000 for 2 years, and my payments were $150 a month, and I'm now 2 years away from paying off my student loan debt. My loans don't negatively affect me, so it was my goal to pay them off as quickly as possible. So that's always something you're going to have to weigh with your clients. Is it better for them to increase their overall debt by adding the interest from these income-driven repayment programs, or are they in a position where they should just pay it off as quickly as possible so then they can get that debt completely off the books? And it's going to be a case-by-case basis. We can go to the next slide. These are some resources, just some pictures so you know that you're at the right place. The borrowers.org is, as I mentioned, a partnership with the AFL-CIO. Joshua Cohen, the student loan lawyer as well, has been a big part of this project. We counseled over 400 student loan borrowers on how to alleviate their student loan debt. This is a great resource where we've condensed a lot of the material of the Department of Education. So it's very easy for you to read through the different types of repayment options, what to do in default, what types of loans get discharged, paying for college for new borrowers, and how to access your student loans. Next slide, please. This is our website. Again, resources, we really think of this as a great blog of what's going on in the student debt world. And in addition, we have student debt stories, just to read testimonials of actual people that are struggling with student loan debt, to give you a taste of how bad this crisis is. And I think with the brilliant minds that are in the room today, how you can work to help these people realize their American dream by also being able to purchase a home. Next slide. And this is Josh's website. And Josh has a great network of attorneys, state by state. They are his graduates. Josh trains people, trains attorneys on how to counsel their clients on student loan debt. At Student Debt Crisis, we refer to Joshua Cohen all the time when we get stuck, get a case of default, get a case of private loan debt. We don't really touch that at all. We refer out to Josh and his list of attorneys. It's a trusted source. We know that they aren't going to, mislead the student loan borrowers. Because another thing to remember is, because the system, for lack of a better word, is so screwy, it's a sensitive topic for a lot of people, and they feel like they've been given the runaround from their student loan lender or the Department of Education. Their lenders are Sallie Mae or Navient, and they're not getting a clear story, so there's some sensitivity there. So we really are careful who we recommend to, and Joshua Cohen and the Student Loan Lawyer Group is pretty much the only lawyers right now that we refer out to, because we can trust that they will handle our borrowers with grace. Next slide, please. Just to recap, these are the resources. I heard at the beginning of the call you were talking about the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. We work with them as well. If there is a private loan complaint and some common complaints are that the lenders, meaning Sallie Mae, Navient, have double charged borrowers, have misapplied payments. We're even seeing, especially with the movement from Sallie Mae to Navient, that there are double reporting on credit reports. So your borrower's $80,000 balance can show up twice, and it would be the same exact loan, but as you know, that would severely affect their credit to debt ratio. Those complaints go to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, and they have been a great champion for student loan debt as well as mortgage debt. This is Joshua's website, and then financial aid, finaid.org is another place that we go to for resources. Next slide, please. All right, I think we are ready for questions and answers. Well, we'll provide the answers if you want to provide the questions. And then I believe Joshua's on the call, but in listen-only mode, Matthew and Bruce.
Okay, thank you for that heads up. Give me just 1 second to get him on. Or maybe let me ask the first question. I'll say we have way more questions than I think we're going to have time to get to. But as Bruce said at the beginning, we are going to do a follow-up series of webinars that will really get a lot more in depth. So apologies if we don't get to your question, but we will be addressing these issues in more detail. So I'll just go through these as quickly as I can. If a client is in default, could they still qualify for the income-based repayment plans?
They need to get back into good standing first. So if it's the very first time, and it's a federal loan, and just a reminder, we are talking about federal loans here only. they could go through default rehab and then get into the program. And once you're in default, you are not applicable for any of these programs until you get your loan back into good standing.
All right. For the various forgiveness programs that you mentioned, is that something that has to be applied for, or is it just an automatic thing?
So there is public service loan forgiveness. There are a few other teacher forgiveness. Something I want to clarify, though, there's what we call debt relief companies that I get calls every day saying, have you heard of Obama's forgiveness program? There's no just tomorrow your loans are forgiven. That does not exist. But yes, for federal loan, public service loan forgiveness, it's 10 years and then the rest of your loans are forgiven. Can you give me the first part of that question again? Do you enroll? So you need to qualify. No one actually enrolls technically until July of 2017. On our site, theborrowers.org, there is an employment verification form. So what we suggest is that you make sure that you are working with a qualified employer and that you keep very copious records of the fact that you have been working in that public service field. You have to be working full-time for 10 years. It does not have to be consecutive 10 years. And full-time for this case of public service loan forgiveness is deemed at 30 hours per week.
Great. So we have someone who's their organization is considering investing in student loan debt counseling to begin to offer this student debt counseling. They've found education and certification through AICCA, and he's asking if this is a good place to start, or if you know if there's other training avenues that would be better for this type of counseling.
You know, this I haven't heard of them. This is where Josh would be great to be on. I just can't say yes or no, and it's so tricky in the sense of there's so many of these companies that seem very good on the surface. They have fancy websites, but I don't know for sure. I can write that down and get back to you, Matthew and Bruce, and let you know.
Yeah, we can follow up. And Josh I think is logged on with a different name. Is why we're having trouble getting him connected. So I did email him to ask what name he's logged in under, so hopefully we will get him on. All right, so we'll just keep going through these. So for the income-based repayment, is the income based on the entire household or just the individual that's on the loan?
I believe when it comes to income-based repayment, it's going to depend if you file separately or jointly. So if you file with your spouse together, you're going to take the household income. And so that's where things, again, is going to go by a case-by-case basis, where it might be a huge benefit for a couple to file separately so that they can take advantage of these programs. While maybe their tax return might suffer, their monthly payment is at least much more affordable.
Great. Could you all just quickly run through discretionary, how they define discretionary income?
Yes, for sure. It's a calculation of, I believe, 150% over the poverty line.
Yeah, that's the basis. They're going to take your household income, and I believe they do it based off of states as well. So they're going to refer that to the poverty level in your state, and then if you make 150% under 150% of the poverty level, that will give you a payment of $0. And then anything above that, they're going to use, they have a formula that includes your family size and your income. Every dollar past 150% will be applied to this formula, and then they will, come up with your monthly payment from that.
But it is your gross income, and so this is something that, we're working on in the advocacy wing of, because I have plenty of borrowers that on the surface are making 100,000 plus, as I talked about before, but they live in states and cities like San Francisco and California, and the cost of living there is so much more expensive. So that's not really taken into account in the way it should be. So there are people that this program doesn't really benefit them. They're not paying any less than they would on the standard repayment program. So there's work to be done for all of these programs, but this is the best we have right now.
Okay, great. So we're just past 2 o'clock. Do you all have a few minutes to go a little long, or should we wrap it up?
We can go till whenever you need.
Okay, great. So someone asked, she said, is it true that loan consolidation could take a loan out of default sooner than rehab? Are there scenarios where consolidation would be the better option?
You can consolidate. To be honest, this is exactly where I would refer to a student debt attorney, because this is an area that gets a little more tricky. That would be great for an attorney to answer. It's yes, but there's specific ways that you can do that, especially if I believe you haven't started receiving garnishment. You can then do a direct consolidation. Just briefly to touch on consolidations, you have federal loans, you want to do a federal loan consolidation. There are private loan consolidations. The moment you do that, you take your loans into private loans, and then you cannot apply for any of these programs. You need to be very careful with your clients that if they are to consolidate, they stick within their federal loan.
And just to touch on the time frame aspect, it is true. You can consolidate after making 3 voluntary payments. So that's a third of the time compared to the 9 payments required to get out of default. So yes, it's true. You can consolidate and shorten that time frame. But again, there will be the possibility of collection costs added before they consolidate your loan, and that can be up to 18, nearly like 19%. So there are some consequences associated with that decision as well.
Okay. And realizing that this may also be something that would be better, more appropriate for Josh, but someone asked if someone's having their wages garnished, would they still be eligible for any of the forgiveness programs? They said specifically if they're working for a C3, but I guess it would apply also to the the 20 years or the 25 years.
Yeah, that I can take. You need to be in good standing in order to qualify for these programs. Okay. Your loan has to be in good standing, meaning not in default, to be able to apply for student public service loan forgiveness, income-based repayment, income contingent repayment, or pay-as-you-earn.
Okay. This is more of a comment, but I'm actually curious if this may be something that you all or other people are working on. So the person says her daughter's interest rate is 8.25%. She says, why don't they lower those rates closer to what mortgage rates are? People should be able to get a loan modification to lower the interest rate. So is that, I mean, is the idea of modifications or kind of refinancing, is that to bring down high interest rates? Is there any work going on that?
There is a lot of work around the issue right now. Many of you are probably familiar with Senator Elizabeth Warren. She's introduced the same piece of legislation twice in the last 2 years called the Bank on Students Refinance Act. And clearly the point of that legislation is to allow federal loans to refinance at the current level, which is 4.29%, which is for many parents and graduate students a huge decrease.
However, we don't have a lot of hope right now on that bill, and other than some private loan consolidation, but again, you surrender the ability to be in any of those income-driven repayment programs, there is no refinancing for federal student loan debt, which, to us, to interject, comment here, seems a little bit nutty, again, for lack of a better word, that you can refinance your automobile, you can refinance your house, but you cannot refinance your federal loan debt. Federal student loan debt, excuse me.
I will second that. That is nutty. So, sorry, I just lost the question. Give me just 1 second. So a few people have made this comment, and maybe this is just kind of getting an issue out there, and you may or may not be aware of it, but a few people have said, so I'll just read this. I recently attended a workshop where lenders told us they no longer accepted income-based repayment, and I think this is when they're calculating, they're doing the debt calculation. They said they had to calculate a payment of 1 to 4% depending on the investor of the total amount borrowed. So a few people have said that mortgage lenders are not using the income-based repayments when they're calculating.
Can you expand, meaning they're not accepting that?
I think when they're calculating their debt to income ratio, it seems like rather than using the actual payment that they're making, that IBR payment, that they're using the much higher number. And I don't know what the 1 to 4% of the total debt was, but I think it seems like they're calculating it using a much higher number, maybe the based on the 10-year repayment track.
Right. So we have the benefit of Joshua Cohen texting me his responses. So I'll just read that, and I agree with Joshua. This sounds like a CFPB issue. Unless it's zero, what Cody is saying, unless they're paying nothing on their student loan debt, they should be accepted, and this should be reported to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau because they're managing their loans, they're keeping their loans in good standing. So, this does not sound right, and it sounds like it should be reported to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And we have heard a lot of reports from student loan borrowers that their lenders on the federal loan side, the servicers, so to speak, will not really tell them about these programs. They'll suggest they go into forbearance or deferment. The borrowers really need to press and ask for these programs because oftentimes that federal student loan servicer will not recommend the best program for the student loan borrower. So that's our job, right? We need to make sure that we're looking out for them and getting them into the best program possible to free up money so they can purchase homes.
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm just trying to go through. There's a lot of comments on this actually, so I agree, and this is something that we will definitely follow up with, and I think you're right, bringing it to the CFPB would be appropriate.
Yeah, and there are other regulators will want to address this with. This is a pretty interesting problem. This is the kind of advocacy that we could easily do too, so we're very interested in it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think that we need to work together with other groups such as yourself to really, drive home how important and how clear this all needs to be, right? So we get so many different responses from so many different people. I'd say even myself that's been advocating for this for 6 years, I can still get tripped up. It's unnecessarily complicated. I think of what Senator Elizabeth Warren said when I met with her, that when things are this complicated, it's done so on purpose. We saw that with credit cards. We've seen that with mortgages. We have to clear this up so the consumer has protections and is clearly knowing what they're getting into.
So one other thing that's come up, and maybe we'll make this the last question, but so one of the things that in our work we deal with a lot is when someone gets a modification or there's a short sale, that forgiven debt is considered taxable income. There's been legislation periodically, actually it was just renewed by the Senate this week, that forgives that, and so it doesn't treat it as taxable income. Folks are asking, and I think it came up a little bit, if you could maybe just expand on, and I believe it came up in the Senate, in a Senate hearing I was watching this week, that a few senators had offered an amendment to try to treat forgiven student debt as not taxable income, but that did not go through. That's an ongoing kind of thing in Congress?
I'm sorry, you cut out at the beginning. I think you were talking about bills in Congress to make sure that these income-driven repayment programs are not taxable.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So currently, right now, Congressman McDermott in in Washington has proposed a bill for the Corinthian college students that were defrauded by Corinthian colleges, which was sold and shut down, so that their forgiveness amount would not be taxed as income. He's also, I believe, introduced a larger bill that is asking for all of these programs. Again, just we don't currently have a lot of faith that this will currently pass, but we like that this is becoming an issue with our legislators, that they're aware that in the next 5 to 10 years, when we see people start to graduate, so to speak, from these programs, we're going to be dealing with now not only, it's going to go from being a Department of Ed issue to an IRS issue. And that to me frightens me, because they cannot take your home if you default on your student loan debt. But if you do not pay your tax debt, the IRS can seize your assets. So we have to be very careful with that when the switchover happens and we start seeing the forgiveness, so to speak, if that's taxed or not. So we're happy that legislators are working on it. Don't have faith at the moment that this current bill will pass, but it's great that it's being worked on. And just to follow up, Josh was able to connect with me, the company ACSII, that is not a trusted company on any of our lists. So,
okay.
Yep.
So we'll connect. I'm sorry, go ahead.
They all seem legitimate. They seem fancy. They seem, they claim that they're the most trusted, source out there. But, we really work with the Department of Education, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Student Loan Lawyer, and also the National Consumer Law Center is another very trusted source.
Great. And I think someone else had mentioned NACA as also
oh, yes. National bankruptcy attorneys as well.
Great. Well, maybe we should, people still have questions, but I don't think it's going to take us an hour to get through them all. So why don't we leave it there, and we're gonna do a series of webinars we mentioned in the fall, and we can really, dig in deep on all of these issues.
This has all been very, very helpful, and I would love us to spend a little bit of time also on this question about what public service is and whether we can apply it to our staffs and our organizations. So helping organizations understand that, and if we had like a little guide to that we could get out sooner rather than later, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Definitely do want to work on some of these advocacy issues as well, and we definitely want to do a deeper dive. But thank you very much, Cody and Natalia, and long distance Josh. We'll look forward to doing more work in this area. Good.
Thank you so much, and just so glad to have this opportunity to get more people to talk about these programs and educate borrowers. It takes a village.
Sounds good. Really quickly, let's just quickly remind people, big opportunity to join NHRC. We are really going to continue working on these kind of issues, want to be on the cutting edge here. Your membership really makes a difference in terms of the advocacy work we do, allows us to do the kind of lobbying we do, but also supports the broader movement of supporting housing counseling, and we really value people being members. We do have a guide to funding sources. We do have resources around down payment assistance in the Federal Home Loan Banks. We have a variety of discounts for technology and things like that are available. But the real reason to join is to support this kind of work and hopefully get us to be a bigger, broader organization. Keep in mind about the CFPB escalation, volunteering, who might be interested in doing that and thinking about how it might fit into a network. Maybe you've got a statewide organization that might want to play that role. Looks like we've got talk in New York and Maryland about doing it on a statewide level. I bet there are other groups that might want to think about it that way. Definitely, if you're in the House and Senate, especially Republicans are going to be in their home districts, if you could go to the meetings and just raise your hand and tell them we're very concerned about the NFMC funding, how it helps people, and that while it's at $42 million in the House, the Senate did $0. This would be devastating for the work that you're doing and the impact in the district that that they serve. Definitely more of that we can do, the stronger we'll all be. We'll have our, we'll be back on the regular schedule in August, and we're very interested in topics people feel like we should put in. So some of you have got some ideas of some of these deeper dives. We're very interested in those, though there's plenty we need to catch up in the next call. Thank you, everybody, for the good work you're doing, and we'll be in touch.